She had lived through storms before, the kind that began with whispers and ended with destruction. Rage, denial, blame. It was a cycle she knew too well. The pattern always repeated. Someone exploded with anger, someone else pretended nothing happened, and then the lies began to spread like smoke. Eventually, the world would move on to something new. But she knew better. The world might forget, but the people inside the story never did. The pain lingered like a ghost. On the courthouse steps, the night air was heavy, thick with humidity and judgment. Flashes from cameras cut through the darkness like lightning. Reporters shouted questions, each one sharper than the last. Her name, once said with admiration, now sounded like an accusation. Her heels clicked against the marble steps, echoing like gunshots in the silence between shouts. Her voice was gone, worn out from hours of defending herself to people who didn't want the truth. Her mascara had melted into dark rivers down her cheeks, her lipstick smeared, and her hands shook as she tried to hold her composure. Dignity, once her armor, now clung to her like something fragile that could fall apart at any second. She kept walking, though every step felt heavier than the last. By morning, every news outlet had a headline. Broken wife, betrayed friend, fallen star. They all used the same words as if they were copying from one another. The pity in their tone made her sick. They turned her pain into entertainment, her heartbreak into hashtags. What she hated most wasn't the gossip. It was the betrayal. Someone she trusted had opened the door to the wolves, and now there was no way to close it. Inside the courthouse, he was pacing back and forth, his reflection bouncing off the polished windows. He looked like a man trapped inside his own mind. "They think they can destroy me with this," he muttered, jaw clenched tight. But his eyes gave him away. Beneath the anger was fear. Real fear. He was a man who had built his world out of image and power, and both were slipping through his fingers. By midnight, the internet had eaten them alive. Every platform was flooded with the footage. Analyzed, slowed down, exaggerated. What had once been private was now public property. Strangers dissected their lives frame by frame. Podcasts turned the scandal into a storyline. Memes mocked their tears. No one cared about truth anymore. It wasn't about right or wrong. It was about who could shout the loudest, who could make it funny, who could go viral. Pain had become a performance. That night, Shekinah sat alone at her vanity. The same vanity where she used to sit beside Tiny, both of them laughing as they put on makeup before a concert. Back then they were unstoppable, two women who had survived fame together. But now her reflection looked foreign. Her eyes were tired, her face pale. She looked like a stranger wearing her skin. Her phone buzzed on the table. She didn't want to look, but she did anyway. The message was from Tiny. 4 words that hit like a bullet. "Why did you do it?" Her hands trembled as she tried to type a reply. Words appeared, then vanished as she deleted them again and again. There was nothing she could write that would make sense, nothing that could fix what was broken. Finally, she set the phone down and whispered to the empty room, "No one believed me when I was quiet." Her voice cracked at the end, but there was no one to hear it. Outside, sirens wailed through the sleeping city, mixing with the soft hum of traffic and the faint echo of laughter from a distant bar. Atlanta was still alive even as her world collapsed. She closed her eyes and imagined another version of her life. One where she never pressed play, where friendship had survived fame, where loyalty mattered more than views. But that world was gone now, shattered the moment she hit upload. Regret tasted like metal in her mouth. By sunrise, her face was everywhere. Every TV, every phone screen, every social feed. Headlines screamed in bold letters. Leaked footage shocks the Harris family. Betrayal or justice. Talk shows debated motives. Influencers posted hot takes. Strangers called into radio shows to share opinions as if they knew her personally. The scandal had grown into something beyond control. It wasn't a story anymore. It was a spectacle. Downtown, in a sleek glass office, TI's PR team worked like soldiers preparing for battle. The room buzzed with tension. Press conference by noon, the manager barked. "We deny everything." Across all platforms. Assistants typed furiously, drafting statements and scheduling posts. Someone adjusted lighting for the cameras. "We bury her," the manager added coldly. TK didn't argue. He didn't need to. The world was already turning against Shekinah. By afternoon, the narrative had flipped completely. Unverified footage sparks outrage. Shekinah under fire. Anonymous sources came out of nowhere, calling her jealous, erratic, unstable. The same people who once praised her now called her dangerous. It was easier to believe the louder story. Truth was quiet, and nobody listened to quiet anymore. Across the city, Tiny sat in her bedroom with the curtains drawn. The TV glowed in the dark, playing endless coverage of the scandal. Her phone was on silent, but she could still feel it vibrating with messages. Producers, friends, strangers. He ignored them all. Her tears had dried hours ago, leaving only the ache behind. The betrayal hurt not because of what was revealed, but because of who had revealed it. The friendship that had once been her safe place now felt poisoned. She remembered that night months ago when Shek had leaned close and whispered, "Play it like it's a prayer." Back then it had sounded beautiful. Now it echoed in her mind like a curse. Every memory between them felt like a warning she hadn't noticed. That evening, T.I. appeared on live television. His voice was smooth, his expression calm. "We are victims of a malicious act," he said. "We trust the legal system to reveal the truth." His tone was perfect. Practiced, steady, convincing. The audience believed him. The internet applauded his composure. But Tiny felt something else. Emptiness. His words sounded like a performance, and she was tired of performances. Meanwhile, across town, Shekinah sat in silence. Her phone had stopped ringing. Her name was now trending for all the wrong reasons. The same crowd that had cheered for her music now called her unstable. The same journalists who had praised her courage now questioned her sanity. She had become the villain in her own story. She turned off the lights and stared out the window. The city lights blurred through her tears, glowing like ghosts in the distance. Somewhere down there, people were laughing, living, forgetting. Life went on for them. For her, it had stopped. She knew she couldn't rewrite what had been done. There was no undoing it. But in the quiet that followed the chaos, a strange calm settled over her. Maybe this was what truth looked like, ugly, lonely, and raw. Maybe survival didn't mean being loved. Maybe it just meant being honest even when the world turned its back. The world had called her broken. Maybe they were right. But as she took a deep breath and lifted her head, she realized something. Broken things could still shine. And in that moment, even surrounded by the wreckage of fame, she refused to disappear. Her endorsements vanished almost overnight. The brands that once fought to feature her name now quietly deleted her pictures. Her phone stopped buzzing. No new messages, no new calls. The silence was louder than any scandal. The city that had once adored her, Atlanta with its flashing lights and endless noise, now whispered her name like a curse. One evening, a news show aired blurry footage of her apartment building. The anchor's voice dripped with false sympathy as the caption flashed across the screen. Exclusive updates on the Shekinah scandal. She didn't wait to see more. She switched off the TV and the apartment fell into darkness. For a moment, she just sat there, letting the silence wrap around her. Every sound from outside, a car door slamming, laughter on the street, a phone ringing in another apartment, felt like judgment inching closer. Days blurred into nights. She barely ate, barely slept. The rush of vengeance that once fueled her was gone, replaced by something heavier, guilt. Regret. The kind that doesn't fade, the kind that settles into your bones. In the quiet, her mind replayed Tiny's face at the moment the footage began to roll. The disbelief, the heartbreak, the betrayal. That image haunted her more than any headline. Fame had given them both everything: power, luxury, attention. But it had taken something too: their humanity. In the chase for control, they had lost the only thing that made their friendship real. When dawn came again, pale and cold, Shekinah finally understood the cruelest truth of all. By exposing everyone else's secrets, she had erased her own soul. The air felt heavier now, like regret itself had moved into her chest. She sat by the window, watching the early lights spill across the skyline. For the first time, the city looked foreign to her. The noise, the traffic, the constant motion, it used to make her feel alive. Now it made her feel small. Then one morning a letter arrived. No name. No return address. Just soft, careful handwriting on the front. Inside was a single line written in blue ink. You wanted the truth seen. Now everyone sees you. She read it again and again until the words lost meaning. She couldn't tell if it came from Tiny, a fan, or some stranger who'd been following the chaos. But it didn't matter. The message was clear enough. The world she had exposed was now staring right back at her. And it saw everything. Across the city, T.I. sat alone in his studio. Empty bottles lined the edge of the table. Sheets of unfinished lyrics were scattered across the floor. The air smelled like whiskey and rain. The press conference had calmed the headlines, but not his conscience. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes of that footage. Moments he couldn't erase, words he couldn't take back. He had built a career on control, on power, on never showing weakness. But now every headline, every podcast, every online comment seemed to question the same thing. Who was the real T.I.? Tiny stepped quietly into the studio. She didn't look at him right away. She just stood there, her reflection blending with his in the glass window. "Do you ever think," she finally said softly, "maybe she wasn't lying?" He didn't answer. He didn't even look up. His silence said more than words ever could. Outside, rain poured steadily, washing the streets clean but leaving the sky gray and heavy. Somewhere in the distance, a reporter's voice drifted through a radio. The Shekinah scandal continues as investigators work to confirm the authenticity of the leaked footage. But the truth no longer mattered. The story had already grown beyond facts or evidence. It had become something else. A reflection of how quickly belief could destroy, how easily people chose sides without knowing the full picture. Tiny stood by the window, watching raindrops trace paths down the glass. Each drop blurred the city lights, turning the skyline into a watercolor painting of sorrow. She wondered if this was how truth always ended. Not with justice, not with healing, but with quiet, lonely ruin. She whispered to herself so softly it barely reached the air, "If I hadn't pressed play, would anyone have listened?" Her voice faded into the hum of the rain. In time the headlines would fade. The footage would vanish from social media. The world would move on to its next scandal, its next story to devour. But the question, the one that started it all, would never die. How far would you go to be heard when silence no longer saves you? Maybe Shekinah wasn't the villain everyone made her out to be. Maybe she was just desperate to be believed. Maybe Tiny wasn't only the victim. Maybe T.I. wasn't the monster the world decided he was, but not the hero he pretended to be either. Perhaps they were all guilty in their own way, each one carrying their own piece of the wreckage. Because in this world of filters, followers, and fragile loyalty, truth doesn't destroy people. It just shows what was already broken inside them. The city kept moving. Cars honked, rain fell, lights blinked red and green. But somewhere behind all that noise, 3 people sat in their own silence, each one wondering what part of themselves had been left behind in the storm. In the end, the scandal wasn't about revenge or justice. It was about the cost of being seen. And as the final news broadcast of the night signed off with the anchor's polished voice, "If this story left you speechless, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe." 1 million viewers reached for their phones. Because in this world of fame and betrayal, the truth is never the end. It's only the beginning.